The following case file is a fictional crime story crafted for entertainment. Characters, locations, and events are imagined and not connected to any real individuals or incidents. This narrative includes mature themes involving crime and investigation. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Nothing shown or described should be interpreted as encouragement or instruction for illegal activity.
The voicemail arrived at 3:17 a.m. No number, no background noise, just breathing. Slow, measured, intentional. Then a voice Mara Ellison hadn't heard in 8 years said, "You missed something, detective." The line went dead. Before this case unfolds, take a moment to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Midnight Casefiles explores the stories that don't stay buried, and this one refuses to stay quiet. Now, listen carefully. Ravenwood slept in layers. At street level, the city pretended nothing ever went wrong. Neon signs buzzed, late buses hissed at empty stops. Apartment lights flickered on and off like tired eyes refusing to close. Beneath that, beneath the pavement and noise, the city remembered everything. Mara Ellison sat in her car outside the old municipal courthouse, engine off, hands resting loosely on the steering wheel. The voicemail replayed in her head again and again, each breath scraping against her nerves. "You missed something." The voice was unmistakable. Evan Calder, her former partner, officially deceased 8 years ago. The case file said cardiac arrest. The funeral said closure. Her memory said unfinished. Mara checked the time. 3:42 a.m. The courthouse loomed ahead of her, its windows dark except for one faint light on the third floor, records. She hadn't planned to come here tonight, but some instincts didn't wait for permission. She exited the car, coat collar up, shoes echoing softly on the wet stone steps. The security guard inside barely glanced up. He knew her face. Everyone in this building did. "Couldn't sleep," he muttered. "Something like that," Mara replied. The records floor smelled like dust and old caper, the scent of forgotten decisions. She keyed into the system and pulled up Calder, Evan, Internal Affairs Review. The file was thinner than it should have been. That bothered her immediately. Heart attacks didn't leave thin files. She scanned the timeline. Death pronounced 02:11 a.m. Location, apartment. No signs of forced entry. No autopsy requested. Mara's jaw tightened. Evan Calder had been 41, fit, paranoid about his health. He jogged at night and counted his steps like confessionals. She scrolled further. Witness statements, none. Medical examiner notes, redacted. Case status, closed. She leaned back in the chair slowly. That voicemail hadn't been a prank. Someone had accessed a voice sample, or someone had never stopped breathing. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One text. "You should have looked at the cameras." Mara stood. Security footage. She pulled the archived camera logs from the night Evan died. Most feeds were missing. Not corrupted. Deleted. Except one. Hallway cam, floor 3, 01:58 a.m. The footage played silently. Evan stood outside his apartment door, keys in hand. He paused, looked down the hallway. Then, just before entering, he turned toward the camera, stared directly into it, and mouthed something. Mara leaned closer. She replayed it frame by frame. His lips formed 2 words, "Not alone." The footage cut out 5 seconds later. Mara exhaled slowly. Evan Calder hadn't died quietly. He tried to warn someone. Her phone buzzed again. Another text. "Meet me where it started." She didn't ask where. She already knew. The river underpass, where her first case with Evan had gone wrong. Mara shut down the terminal, slipped her coat back on, and headed for the exit. Behind her, the courthouse returned to silence. But the city had started listening again, and this time, it wasn't letting her ignore it.
The river underpass smelled the same as it always had. Oil, wet concrete, rust carried on cold air. Mara Ellison parked beneath the overhang and cut the engine. The city murmured above her, tires humming, distant horns, life pretending nothing ever circled back. 8 years ago, this was where Evan Calder had nearly gotten them both killed. Tonight, it was where the dead were asking questions. She stepped out of the car and walked toward the waterline, boots crunching against gravel. The underpass lights flickered in uneven intervals, never quite deciding whether to stay on. "Cute," she muttered. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You're standing where he lied." Mara didn't reply. She scanned the shadows instead. No footsteps, no echoes, just the river sliding past like it had somewhere better to be. "Show yourself," she said calmly. Nothing answered. The message wasn't a summons. It was confirmation. Someone knew her habits, her memories, her guilt. She crouched near the graffiti-scarred pillar where Evan had once dragged her behind cover, bleeding from a shoulder wound that hadn't been in any report. Back then, they'd been chasing a witness who vanished between one streetlight and the next. Official explanation, fled town. Unofficial truth, swallowed by something neither of them could name. Mara straightened. Her phone vibrated again. You weren't the only one he warned. That stopped her. She pulled up Evan Calder's old case notes, the ones she'd quietly copied years ago before Internal Affairs sealed the originals. Names, dates, incidents dismissed as unrelated. At the time, Evan had called them coincidences he didn't trust. Now they looked like a trail. 3 officers, all mid-career, all officially dead within a 5-year span. Calder, Evan, cardiac arrest. Lillian Rowe, single vehicle crash. Thomas Myers, apparent suicide. All cases closed fast. All with minimal documentation. All tied to investigations involving missing witnesses. Mara's jaw tightened. She'd attended 2 of those funerals. She'd never questioned the 3rd. That was on her. Back in her car, she drove straight to the precinct, mind racing faster than the streets could keep up with. The bullpen was quiet. Late shift, low noise, tired people pretending not to see what didn't want to be found. Imani looked up from her workstation when Mara passed. You look like you found something you weren't looking for. I need archived IA files, restricted ones. Imani raised an eyebrow. That's a sentence that ends careers. Only if we're wrong. Imani hesitated, then turned back to her screen. Names? Mara slid a notepad across the desk. 3 names. Imani's fingers paused. Oh, she said quietly. Those? You recognize them. Not personally, but their files are weird. Define weird. Selective redactions, time gaps, missing audio logs. She glanced up, like someone cleaned only the important parts. That was enough. They worked in silence after that, the room filled with the low hum of servers and the sound of decisions being unmade. Patterns emerged. Each officer had flagged a witness disappearance within weeks of their own deaths. Each had submitted requests for off-record interviews. Each had been told to stand down, and each had ignored it. Mara leaned back slowly. Evan hadn't been reckless. He'd been consistent. Her phone buzzed again. Same number. 3 wasn't coincidence. It was containment. Mara exhaled through her nose. Who are you? She typed. The reply came instantly. Someone who learned to survive by watching who didn't. Imani frowned. You okay? Mara locked her phone. I think Evan was mapping something bigger than a single case. Like what? Mara looked at the screen again. A web of closed files. Witnesses who vanished. Investigators who followed. A filtration system, she said. For what? For truth. Silence settled between them. Imani broke it first. If this is real, whoever built that system is still active. Yes, Mara said. And they're still listening. As if on cue, the lights flickered again. Mara stood. Print everything, she said. Offline. Imani nodded. Mara, yeah. If someone wanted you to see this, why not just send it? Mara picked up her coat. Because, she said quietly, they want me to choose to keep going. Outside, rain began to fall again. Not heavy, not dramatic. Just enough to remind the city it could still wash things away. Mara stepped into it without hesitation. The pattern was real. And it was already closing in.
The witness wasn't supposed to exist. Mara Ellison stared at the screen in Imani's workstation, eyes fixed on a single line buried deep in a redacted report. Status: relocated. Not deceased, not missing. Relocated. That alone was a lie.
Witnesses in closed cases didn't get relocated quietly. They entered protection programs, generated paperwork, left trails. This name had none of that. Jonah Pike, age at disappearance, 29. Occupation, municipal contractor. Last known involvement, eyewitness to a fatal alley shooting 12 years ago. Official case outcome, solved. Shooter convicted. Witness testimony corroborated. Mara exhaled slowly. Pull everything, she said. Imani hesitated. This file's buried under 3 authorization layers. Then someone buried it on purpose. Imani's fingers moved again. Piece by piece, Jonah Pike's digital footprint emerged. Utility records, medical check-ins, transit logs, all abruptly stopping the same week Evan Calder had flagged the case for review. Mara leaned in. That's when Evan noticed him, she said. And that's when Jonah disappeared, Imani replied. They followed the paper trail sideways instead of forward. Not where Jonah went, where he was removed from. A transportation authorization surfaced, unsigned, undated, routed through an internal logistics channel rarely used outside disaster response. Destination field blank. That's not witness protection, Imani said quietly. That's extraction. Mara's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He didn't vanish. He was stored. Mara didn't look away from the screen. Where? She typed. The reply came slower this time. Somewhere people go when they're too inconvenient to erase. Mara straightened. Hospitals, institutions, facilities that process people quietly. She pulled county health system records. One anomaly stood out. A long-term care facility on the city's south edge, officially a rehabilitation center, unofficially a place where people went and were rarely spoken of again. Jonah Pike's name wasn't listed, but his fingerprints were, admitted under a numeric identifier. No visitors, no outgoing correspondence. Diagnosis, cognitive decline following trauma. That's false, Mara said flatly. He was lucid when he testified. Imani swallowed. Someone rewrote his reality. Mara grabbed her coat. They drove without sirens. The facility sat behind tall fencing, lights dim even in daylight. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and resignation. An administrator met them with practiced politeness. We don't discuss patient identities. Mara showed her badge. You discuss this one. She slid the fingerprint badge across the desk. The administrator's jaw tightened. He's not well, the woman said finally. Neither am I, replied, but I'm still here. They were led down a quiet corridor. Jonah Pike sat near a window, staring at nothing. Older than his years, eyes hollowed by years of silence. When Mara said his name, he flinched. You're not supposed to be here, he whispered. Mara crouched in front of him. You testified in a murder trial 12 years ago, she said gently. You told the truth. Jonah shook his head. They told me I was confused. Who? The men who asked the same questions until my answers changed. Mara felt something cold settled in her chest. Jonah looked at her, eyes suddenly sharp. You're late, but not too late. What did you see? Mara asked. Jonah's hands trembled. A badge, he said. Not yours. Another one. Mara's phone buzzed again. That's the first lie.
The resistance didn't come loudly. It came politely. Mara returned to the precinct with Jonah Pike's statement recorded, documented, sealed. By the time she reached her desk, an email was already waiting. Subject: Case Scope Clarification. From Deputy Chief Aaron Kine. The message was brief. Effective immediately, you are to cease all independent investigation related to the Calder review. Further action will be considered in subordination. Mara stared at the screen. Then she laughed once, quiet, humorless. Kline wasn't corrupt. He was careful, which made him dangerous. She forwarded the message to her private archive and continued working. 10 minutes later, Internal Affairs appeared. 2 officers. Neutral expressions. Too fast. Detective Ellison, one said. We need a word. They led her into an interview room. No camera light, no recorder. That told her everything. You're operating outside approved parameters, the other officer said. I'm following evidence. Your reopening settled matters. Settled for who? Silence. The door opened. Deputy Chief Kline stepped in. Mara, he said softly, you're good at what you do. That's why this concerns me. She met his eyes. You knew Evan was onto something. Kline didn't answer. That was answer enough. Do you think this ends well? He asked. You pull at this thread. You tear open things people buried to survive. People didn't survive, Mara said. They were contained. Kline's jaw flexed. You don't see the full picture. Then show it to me. He leaned closer. There are systems designed to prevent instability. Sometimes that means managing truth. Mara stood. That's not justice. No, Kline agreed. It's control. When she left the room, her access card no longer opened restricted areas. Her email permissions were downgraded, her authority quietly reduced. Imani met her eyes across the bullpen. They're blocking you, she said. Yes, Mara replied.
which means we're close. Her phone buzzed again. You just crossed the line Evan died on. Mara typed back one word. Good. Outside, rain began to fall harder. No longer gentle, no longer patient. The city wasn't pretending anymore, and neither was she.
Mara Ellison stopped trusting coincidences years ago. That instinct saved her now. Her access was downgraded, her inbox scrubbed, her name quietly removed from 2 active task forces. It was subtle enough to look procedural, careful enough to feel intentional. They weren't arresting her, they were isolating her, which meant whatever she'd uncovered didn't just threaten one case, it threatened a structure. Mara drove past the precinct without stopping and headed for the one place no one thought to watch anymore, the old evidence annex near the rail yard. It was scheduled for demolition, its contents digitized and boxed for storage. In reality, it was a graveyard for inconvenient physical proof. The security system still recognized her badge, for now. Inside, dust hung in the air like memory refusing to settle. Shelves towered over narrow aisles, stacked with boxes labeled in fading ink. Mara pulled a list from her pocket. 3 names, 3 cases, 3 investigators. She didn't look for what connected the victims. She looked for what connected the handlers. A pattern emerged quickly. Each case had passed through the same administrative review desk. Same signature, same initials, AK. Deputy Chief Aaron Klein. Mara closed her eyes briefly. Klein hadn't just known, he'd curated. She found a box marked Witness Materials, unentered. Inside were items never logged into evidence. Cassette tapes, personal journals, encrypted drives, all tagged with numeric identifiers instead of names. Someone had removed identities to make people manageable. Mara's phone vibrated. Unknown number. You found the vault. She didn't answer. She photographed everything, uploaded copies to an off-grid drive, and resealed the box exactly as she found it. As she turned to leave, footsteps echoed at the far end of the aisle. Not rushed, measured. A man stepped into the light. Mid-50s, plain clothes, no badge visible. You're somewhere you shouldn't be, he said calmly. Mara's hand rested near her weapon. So are you. He smiled faintly. Evan Calder said the same thing once. That hit harder than a threat. Who are you? Mara asked. Someone who cleans up after messes, he replied. And right now you're becoming one. Mara's jaw tightened. You killed him. No, the man said. I warned him. About what? About you. The man stepped back into shadow. You're not the problem, detective. Curiosity is. It spreads. By the time Mara reached the exit, the man was gone. But the message lingered. Evan hadn't died for one truth. He died because he refused to stop connecting them. The first attempt didn't involve violence. It involved paperwork. Mara's suspension notice arrived before she reached home. Administrative leave pending review. Department weapon surrendered. Badge deactivated. They were cutting her loose before she could cut deeper. Mara didn't go home. She drove to a friend's apartment, someone who owed her silence and didn't ask questions. She laid out the evidence across a kitchen table while rain battered the windows like impatience. Jonah Pike's statement, the hidden evidence vault, Klein's signature. It was enough to ruin careers, not enough to stop what was coming. Her phone rang. Unknown number. This time, the voice was live. You're forcing escalation, the man from the annex said. Mara held the phone steady. You escalated when you started storing people. A pause. You don't understand what happens when truth moves faster than institutions. I understand exactly that, Mara said. I live with the bodies. Another pause. You won't survive the next phase. The line went dead. That night, someone broke into her apartment, not to steal, to search. Drawers were opened, not dumped. Files shifted, not taken. Her backup drive, gone. They wanted to know what she had already shared. Mara stood in the doorway long enough to memorize the damage, then left again. She wasn't running. She was going dark. She switched phones, ditched her car near the river, and vanished into the city the way Evan once taught her. Off-grid, untraceable, watching. From a public terminal, she sent one message, not to police, not to media, to a retired judge Evan trusted once. If anything happens to me, open the folder marked containment. The reply came an hour later. I wondered when this would resurface. Mara exhaled slowly. They hadn't silenced her. They confirmed everything. Above ground, the city moved on, unaware, indifferent. Below it, systems shifted.
And for the first time, Mara Ellison wasn't being followed. She was being hunted.
Mara Ellison hadn't slept in 30 hours. She didn't need to. Adrenaline had replaced rest, sharpening the world into edges and angles. From a borrowed laptop in a late-night diner, she worked through the last of Evan Calder's encrypted notes, the ones he'd hidden inside innocuous maintenance logs. One line kept repeating, disguised as a checksum. If they deny the dead, look for the living they erased. Mara traced the metadata: a municipal contract, a facilities vendor, a sub-basement wing beneath the old civic hospital, decommissioned on paper, staffed in reality. That's where they kept people who couldn't be erased, not stored like Jonah Pike, hidden. She slipped into the hospital just before dawn, moving with the confidence of someone who belonged. Old habits opened doors faster than keys. The sub-basement smelled of coolant and bleach. Fluorescent lights hummed like they'd learned not to draw attention. A nurse glanced up. "Visiting hours are—" "I know," Mara said softly. "I'm late." Room B17. The chart outside listed a patient ID, not a name. Inside, a man lay propped against pillows, oxygen hissing quietly. His hair was thinner, his face gaunt, but his eyes were sharp, too sharp for the diagnosis on the chart. "Detective Ellison," he said. Mara froze. "You know me?" "I know everyone who tried to stop them," he replied. "I just didn't expect you to come." "Who are you?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Daniel Hargreave. I was the second witness in the alley shooting, the one they said fled the country." Mara's chest tightened. Daniel had testified off-record once. Evan had chased that lead for months before his death. "They told me you died," Mara said. "They told me I was sick," Daniel replied. "Turns out fear presents like illness when administered daily." He coughed, then steadied himself. "They didn't kill me because killing makes noise. They hid me because hiding teaches obedience." Mara recorded everything: names, processes, orders that came down unsigned but absolute. And then Daniel said the thing she'd been dreading. "Klein visited me," he said, not as a threat, as reassurance. Mara's jaw set. "He told me the system was necessary," Daniel continued, "that witnesses create instability, that truth needs pacing." A knock sounded at the door. Mara closed the recorder. Footsteps paused outside. Someone was listening.
Mara left the hospital without running. Running would have confirmed suspicion. Instead, she walked, steady, deliberate, until she reached sunlight and noise, and a city that had no idea it was being curated. She met the retired judge at a small office overlooking the rail yards. Evan's containment folder lay open on the desk, its contents spread like a confession no one had wanted to hear. The judge read silently, then exhaled. "This isn't a conspiracy," he said finally. "It's policy." Mara nodded. "With casualties." They made copies. Physical, digital, distributed. A journalist Evan trusted received one package. A civil rights attorney received another. A federal oversight contact received the third. No single point of failure. By evening, the first inquiry request landed. By night, the city felt different. Sirens multiplied, phones rang, statements were drafted and redrafted. Deputy Chief Klein held a press conference at noon the next day. Calm, measured, reassuring. "Allegations of impropriety are being reviewed internally," he said. "There is no evidence of systemic wrongdoing." Mara watched from a cafe across the street. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You've accelerated something you can't control." She typed back. "That's the point." As if on cue, a leak hit the networks, not hers, but adjacent. A former logistics coordinator stepped forward, then a hospital administrator, then a clerk from the annex. The truth didn't surface as one story. It surfaced as pressure, and pressure breaks systems. That night, a warrant was signed. Not for Mara, for the annex, for the sub-basement, for Deputy Chief Aaron Klein's office. Mara didn't celebrate. She knew better, because exposure doesn't end control. It just forces it to adapt.
Collapse never announces itself. It arrives disguised as confusion. By morning, Ravenwood was choking on contradictions. Officials denied knowledge while issuing suspensions. Departments locked doors that had never needed locks. Press secretaries spoke in careful half-sentences, trying to sound calm while systems they depended on began to fracture. The annex was sealed, the hospital's sub-basement shut down, digital records vanished faster than warrants could reach them. Too late. The truth had already escaped containment. Mara Ellison watched the city unravel from the safety of anonymity. A borrowed apartment, curtains half drawn, radio low, names spilled into the open. Administrators resigned for personal reasons. A logistics officer attempted to flee the state and was detained at the airport with 4 burner phones and a hard drive full of ghosts. Deputy Chief Aaron Klein did not resign. He doubled down. At a second press conference, his voice was tighter, his smile thinner. There is no evidence these allegations constitute a coordinated system, he said. What you're seeing is coincidence inflated by speculation. Mara muted the radio. Coincidence was what people called patterns when they were afraid of responsibility. Her phone vibrated. A secure message from the retired judge. They're moving to contain fallout. You're being positioned as the source of misconduct. Mara exhaled slowly. Of course they were. You didn't dismantle a system like this without becoming its last defense mechanism. Then came the call she hadn't expected. Imani. They just pulled my badge, she said quietly. IA escorted me out. Mara closed her eyes. I'm sorry. Don't be, Imani replied. It means we were right. Before Mara could answer, another alert chimed in. A federal seal this time. An oversight task force had been authorized. Subpoenas issued. Klein's office was raided that afternoon. But systems rarely fall cleanly. That night, the retired judge collapsed in his office. Massive stroke. Pronounced dead before paramedics arrived. Mara felt the loss like a weight pressing against her ribs. They hadn't killed him for what he knew. They'd killed him to remind everyone else what resistance cost. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. This is why Evan tried to stop you. Mara typed back with steady fingers. This is why he failed. Outside, sirens howled, not distant, not orderly. Panicked. The system was breaking. And when systems break, they take people with them.
The city didn't heal. It adjusted. Federal investigators stayed for months. Committees formed, dissolved, reformed under new names. Policies were rewritten with softer language and harder enforcement. The annex was officially decommissioned. The subbasement was mischaracterized. Aaron Klein was arrested, not for murder, not for conspiracy, for obstruction. It was enough to end him, not enough to explain everything. Jonah Pike was released into protective custody under his real name for the first time in 12 years. Daniel Hargreave was transferred to a real hospital and given a window that opened. Imani found work outside law enforcement. She slept better. Mara didn't. Her suspension quietly became a reassignment. No promotion, no apology, just a smaller office and fewer resources. A message disguised as mercy. She accepted it. Some nights she drove past the river underpass and parked where Evan had once bled beside her. She listened to the water move beneath concrete and thought about how many truths it had carried away unnoticed. Her phone hadn't buzzed in weeks. Until one night, long past midnight. Unknown number. One message. Containment failed. Adaptation continues. Mara stared at the screen, then powered the phone off. She wasn't afraid. She was ready. Because systems didn't fear exposure. They feared persistence. Mara Ellison had lost partners, lost mentors, lost sleep. But she hadn't lost the one thing they could never store, relocate, or erase. The decision to keep going. Somewhere beneath the city, something shifted. Quieter this time. Learning. And Mara turned toward the dark, knowing the next case wouldn't announce itself. It never did.